Zorth was small, even by his own people's standards, but in the eyes of the galaxy, the Zorthans had always been warriors. For generations they were revered, their courage matched only by their agility. They were not the tallest, nor the most powerful physically, but they fought with precision, their tactics outsmarting even the largest enemies. Zorth had seen victory after victory. His people were known for turning the tide of battles that seemed impossible to win. It was the Zorthans who had brought down the Truk commanders when the galactic army had faced its darkest hour. Zorth remembered those days, the glory of standing tall among the giants of the galaxy. But glory fades. Wars never end as they begin. The galactic army, once unified, began to splinter under the weight of a new, relentless enemy. This was no ordinary war. It was a conflict unlike any Zorth had faced, a ruthless alien force that didn't fight for territory or resources. They fought to exterminate. And the galaxy fought back with all it had, desperate to stop the onslaught. Zorth and his people were sent to the front lines. Their speed and adaptability were vital in the early days of the war. They navigated the war zones where others faltered. Yet, as the war dragged on, it became clear that this enemy was unlike any before. Their numbers were endless, their ships vast, and their weapons devastating. The galaxy's finest forces crumbled under the pressure. The Zorthans held their ground longer than most, fighting as hard as they always had, but it wasn't enough. The war had turned, and the enemy pushed further into Allied territory. One by one, the great species of the galaxy retreated, abandoning planets they once fought to protect. Zorth's people, so small in the grand scheme of things, began to feel the weight of their size. The larger species, in their desperation to save themselves, began to see the Zorthans as expendable. They were too small, too few in number to make a difference anymore. When the order to retreat came, it wasn't given to the Zorthans. They were left behind. Zorth watched as the mighty fleets of the Galactic Alliance vanished into the stars, leaving him and his kind stranded on a barren world, left to die in a war they hadn't yet lost. Injury and exhaustion overwhelmed Zorth as he gazed up at the empty sky. He could still feel the pulse of battle in his bones, but now, it was coupled with the bitter sting of betrayal. His people had been left to their fate, deemed useless by those they once fought alongside. The pride he had once felt began to dissolve, replaced by a deep sadness. His warriors, his brothers and sisters, had been abandoned by those they had called allies. And as Zorth lay in the dust of a forsaken battlefield, he began to wonder if there was anything left worth fighting for. But the galaxy is vast, and fate has a way of surprising even the most broken of warriors. It was then, when all seemed lost, that Zorth heard the unfamiliar hum of an approaching ship. It wasn't one of the grand war vessels of the galactic army, nor was it the enemy. This was something else, something smaller, more modest. Humans. In the galaxy, humans were known as newcomers, a species that had only recently found its place among the stars. They weren't the strongest, nor the fastest, but they had something that Zorth recognized the moment he saw them land: honor. Where the larger, more powerful species had abandoned the Zorthans, these humans saw something different. They didn't see size as a measure of worth. They saw a warrior, alone, but not defeated. The humans, led by a captain who understood the pain of betrayal, approached Zorth with an offer. They had heard of the Zorthans, of their bravery and their loyalty. And they knew what it meant to be left behind. Zorth, weakened but still holding on to a thread of hope, listened. The humans didn't care that he was small. They didn't care that his people had been deemed insignificant by the galaxy's elite. They cared about what was right. They offered Zorth something no one else had, a chance to fight again, to reclaim his people's honor. And in that moment, for the first time since the war had turned, Zorth felt something stir within him. Hope. The humans weren't just offering him rescue. They were offering him redemption. And Zorth, the small warrior left behind by the galaxy, realized that he had not been abandoned by all. The humans, with their strange mix of stubbornness and loyalty, would stand by his side. Together they would fight for what truly mattered, not power or glory, but honor. And for Zorth, that was enough. Zorth had always been a warrior, but after being abandoned, something inside him had shattered. The humans saw it. His once steady gaze now carried the weight of betrayal, his movements no longer as sharp. But they didn't see weakness in him. They saw a fighter, a soldier who had been wronged, and they knew what that felt like. The human soldiers, grizzled and battle-hardened themselves, took Zorth under their wing, not to rebuild his body, but to restore his spirit. They didn't treat him as a fragile thing, despite his small size. They saw him as one of their own, and that alone sparked something within Zorth that had almost been lost. Through long nights by the fire and endless training sessions, the humans shared their stories, of battles fought and lost, of victories hard won, and of the strength it took to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. They weren't the largest soldiers in the galaxy, but they fought with an intensity that came from something deeper than muscle. Zorth began to see that his worth wasn't measured by his size or even his strength. His worth came from his will, the same will that had carried him through countless battles, even when the odds were against him. Honor, they taught him, was not given, it was earned, over and over, by those who refused to surrender. As his confidence returned, so did Zorth's focus. The humans were not content to merely survive, they had a purpose, and they gave Zorth one as well. Together they began to build a plan, not for revenge, but for justice. The species who had abandoned Zorth, and his people had acted out of fear and arrogance. Zorth knew now that their betrayal was not just personal, it was a stain on the very idea of honor. If the galaxy was to survive, it had to be shown that loyalty and courage meant more than power and size. With human help, Zorth began to gather information on the Galactic War Council. These species, once allies, had weaknesses, ones that Zorth knew well from his time fighting alongside them. They weren't invincible, and Zorth's mind, sharp and tactical, could see a way forward. But something deeper was stirring within him. As they traveled through the dark reaches of space, Zorth began to feel an odd pull, a sensation that he couldn't explain. It wasn't physical, but more like an energy, something ancient that seemed to call to him from the farthest edges of the galaxy. At first, he thought it was just the stress of the journey, but the feeling grew stronger with every passing day. The humans noticed it too, and though they didn't understand what was happening, they trusted Zorth's instincts. They had learned to trust in things they couldn't always see. The feeling led them to a distant planet, one that Zorth knew only from legend. It was a place his people had spoken of long ago, before the wars, before the galaxy had descended into chaos. The Zorthans, small as they were, had once been keepers of something ancient, something powerful. Over time, that history had been forgotten, lost in the rush of modern warfare and the fight for survival. But now, standing on the surface of this ancient world, Zorth understood that his small size, what the others had seen as a weakness, was the very key to unlocking that forgotten power. As they ventured deeper into the planet's hidden ruins, Zorth could feel the energy pulsing through him, growing stronger. His people had been more than warriors. They had been guardians of something greater, a force that had the potential to change the balance of power in the galaxy. And now, Zorth stood at the edge of that discovery. He could sense that this energy, this ancient power source, was tied directly to his kind. The Zorthans, small as they were, had been chosen for this very purpose. And now, Zorth had the chance to reclaim that legacy, to restore the honor that had been lost. The humans stood by him, watching as he began to unlock the secrets of his people's past. They didn't understand the full magnitude of what was happening, but they didn't need to. They knew that Zorth's journey was one of redemption, and they were ready to stand beside him, no matter what came next. The power that Zorth had tapped into was unlike anything he had ever felt. It was as if the very universe itself had recognized him and his people as its chosen protectors. And now, with the humans by his side, Zorth knew that the battle ahead wasn't just about winning a war. It was about restoring balance, about showing the galaxy that true strength came not from size or numbers, but from the honor and courage of those who refused to be broken. Zorth felt the pull of the ancient energy growing stronger with each step. The humans, though unsure of what awaited them, never questioned his instincts. They trusted him completely, and for the first time in a long while, Zorth felt the weight of that trust, knowing it wasn't misplaced. As they ventured further into the desolate reaches of the galaxy, they finally arrived at the planet, the one from his people's legends. It had been lost to time, forgotten by most, but Zorth felt a deep connection to it. This was where the ancient energy source resided, and he knew it was meant for the Zorthans alone. As they descended into the ruins, the sensation intensified. It was like the very planet was calling to him, recognizing him. There, buried deep within the heart of the planet, they found it, an artifact, ancient and powerful, pulsing with energy. Zorth could barely comprehend its magnificence, but he knew what it meant. This was the key to his people's true strength, something only his kind could wield. The larger species, for all their might, could never have understood it. The Zorthans had been small for a reason. This power was theirs alone to command. It was a forgotten legacy, now uncovered in the most desperate of times. As Zorth reached out and touched the artifact, something shifted inside him. It was as if the energy coursed directly into his very being, awakening abilities he never knew he possessed. His mind became sharper, his senses heightened, and his strength, once limited by his size, surged. He could feel the universe around him in ways he had never imagined. His movements were faster, more precise, and his instincts were amplified to an almost supernatural degree. This was the power his people had been meant to wield all along. The humans watched in awe as Zorth transformed before their eyes. They had already seen him as a warrior, but now, he was something more. Zorth began to share what he had learned with them, explaining how the energy worked, how it could be harnessed. Together they trained, refining these newfound abilities, preparing for what was to come. Zorth understood that the enemy they faced was unlike any they had battled before, but now, with this ancient power, they had a chance. A chance not just to survive, but to win. And Zorth wasn't just unlocking powers for himself. He was rediscovering what it meant to be a Zorathan. His people had been abandoned, left to die on the battlefield because of their size. But now, he saw the truth clearly. What the galaxy had seen as a limitation had been the key all along. His small size wasn't a weakness, it was a design. The artifact had been created for his people, and only they could wield it properly. It was their physiology, their unique connection to the energy, that allowed them to manipulate it in ways the larger species could never understand. The very thing that had caused them to be cast aside was now their greatest strength. Zorth's heart swelled with a sense of purpose. He had been betrayed, yes, but that betrayal had led him to this moment. The galaxy would soon learn that they had made a grave mistake in underestimating the Zorathans. He wasn't just fighting to survive anymore, he was fighting to reclaim the honor of his people, to show the galaxy what they had lost by turning their backs on the Zorathans. And now, with the humans by his side, Zorth felt more powerful than ever. The time for redemption was at hand. Zorth, once seen as insignificant, now stood as the key to defeating the greatest enemy the galaxy had ever known. He was ready to face the species that had betrayed him, ready to confront the enemy that threatened them all. And as he prepared for the battles ahead, he knew that his size, once a source of shame, was now his greatest asset. The galaxy would soon understand what it meant to be a Zorathan warrior, and they would regret ever leaving him behind. Zorth had returned, no longer the abandoned warrior who had been cast aside. Now, he was a force to be reckoned with, confident in his abilities and armed with the ancient power that pulsed through him. The humans stood by his side, their loyalty unwavering. Together they moved with purpose, ready to confront those who had left Zorth and his people for dead. The Galactic Council, once the beacon of unity in the galaxy, had become corrupt, blinded by their own power and arrogance. Zorth was not seeking revenge, but justice, for his people, and for all those who had been wronged by the Council's betrayal. When Zorth and the humans made their presence known, the Council was taken aback. They hadn't expected the Zorathans to survive, let alone return with such strength. The Council members squirmed under the weight of their guilt, but Zorth didn't give them a chance to deny the truth. He laid it all out, how they had abandoned his people on the battlefield, deeming them too small, too insignificant. But now, Zorth stood before them, more powerful than they could have imagined, holding the key to the ancient power that could save them all. The council, speechless and cornered, had no choice but to face the consequences of their actions. Just as Zorth prepared to demand justice, the unthinkable happened. The alien enemy, thought to be far from the council's reach, launched a surprise attack. Ships descended from the skies, weapons blazing, and chaos erupted in an instant. The Galactic Council, so focused on their own political games, had been caught off guard. Panic spread through their ranks as they scrambled for safety, completely unprepared for the onslaught. Zorth realized that the Council's survival was tied to the future of the galaxy itself. If they fell now, the enemy would sweep across the stars, leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. There was no time to waste. Zorth sprang into action, his newfound powers giving him a clarity and speed that few could match. He directed the humans with precision, their trust in him absolute. They moved as one, fighting to hold off the alien attackers and protect the Council, despite the Council's failings. Zorth's mind raced, calculating every move, every strategy. His years of battle experience, combined with his enhanced abilities, made him a formidable leader in the chaos. He knew the weaknesses of the enemy, and he exploited them with ruthless efficiency. But it wasn't just the humans who followed him now. As word spread of Zorth's return, the remnants of his people, scattered and hidden after their abandonment, began to rally behind him. They had thought themselves forgotten, but seeing Zorth, empowered, fearless, and leading the charge, ignited a fire within them. They joined the fight, their small size no longer a limitation, but an advantage. Zorth led them with a sense of purpose they hadn't felt in years, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they still had a place in this galaxy. In the heart of the battle, Zorth's leadership shone. He coordinated the defense with a tactical brilliance that outmaneuvered the enemy at every turn. His small stature allowed him to move quickly, dodging attacks and leading daring assaults. The humans, inspired by his courage, fought harder, their respect for him growing with each passing moment. Together, they pushed back against the alien forces, turning what had seemed like a hopeless situation into a fight for survival and victory. The Galactic Council, once cowards cowering in the shadows, watched in awe as Zorth and his forces defended them. They had underestimated him, and now they could only marvel at his strength, his determination. Zorth had come not just to confront his betrayers, but to prove that honor, loyalty, and courage were what truly mattered in the end. The battle raged on, but Zorth's leadership turned the tide, and soon, the alien enemy began to falter, their surprise attack losing momentum. By the time the dust settled, the battlefield was littered with the remains of the enemy forces. Zorth stood at the center, his people and the humans around him, victorious. The Galactic Council, once so sure of their superiority, now understood the grave mistake they had made. Zorth had not only saved them, but he had also shown them that true strength didn't come from power or size, it came from honor, and from the unbreakable will of those who refused to be forgotten. In the aftermath of the battle, the galaxy was still reeling from what had transpired. Zorth had not only led his people and the humans to victory but had secured the survival of the Galactic Council. Yet, as the dust settled, a new truth began to emerge, one that would change everything Zorth thought he knew about his people and their place in the galaxy. Through the collaboration of human scientists and Zorthan scholars, they uncovered a startling discovery, an ancient, long-forgotten link between humans and Zorthans. Their species shared a common ancestral bond, one buried deep in the genetic code of both races. This revelation went far beyond the power Zorth had uncovered. The genetic link explained why the humans had been so naturally drawn to help the Zorthans, why they had seen honor and strength in a people others had discarded. It wasn't just an alliance born from mutual respect, it was a reunion of long-lost kin. Together, Zorth and the humans realized that this connection wasn't just historical, it held the key to reviving the Zorthan species. By working together, they could unlock dormant potentials in both races, ensuring that the Zorthans would not only survive but thrive in ways they had never thought possible. With this knowledge, a new alliance was born, one forged not in the desperation of war, but in the understanding of a shared future. Zorth and the human leaders stood together, united by the knowledge that their destinies were intertwined. This wasn't just about rebuilding the Zorthan civilization, it was about building something greater. Humanity had proven its loyalty, its capacity for honor, and its refusal to abandon those in need. Now Zorth and his people had the chance to rebuild their world, with the humans standing by their side, ready to face whatever challenges the galaxy might throw at them. As Zorth looked upon his people, no longer scattered and broken, he knew that they were no longer the forgotten race left behind by the galaxy. Together with the humans, they had formed a bond that could withstand any threat, and this alliance would ensure the survival of both species. What had once seemed impossible was now within reach. Zorth, once the warrior left to die, had become a symbol of hope, a hero whose courage and honor had restored his people's future. And the humans, by recognizing his worth, had proven that true allies are not measured by power, but by loyalty. Reflecting on everything that had come to pass, Zorth realized that the greatest battles are not won with weapons, but with unwavering spirit. The journey he had taken, from abandonment to rediscovery, from a warrior cast aside to the leader of a new age, was not just his story. It was the story of honor, of standing by those who others had forgotten. In the end, it was the smallest of warriors who had shown the galaxy that strength isn't about size or power, it's about heart, about the bonds we forge, and the courage to fight for what's right, no matter the odds. Zorth's legacy would live on, not just in the hearts of his people, but in the shared history of both the Zorthans and the humans. Together, they had proven that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. That even the smallest spark can ignite a flame capable of lighting up the entire galaxy. Zorth's journey, from a forgotten soldier to the savior of his people, stood as a reminder to all that true strength comes from within, and that, when we stand together, we can overcome anything.